You can already feel the smile tugging at your lips. Let's dance. Oh, you always know how to make me happy. Laughter. That's the spirit. Keep clapping. I will. This is wonderful. One more spin. A billionaire discovers his maid dancing for his paralyzed mother. What happens next will touch something deep inside you. The security footage from that quiet evening revealed a moment no one had expected. Landon Hale had been working late into the night at his office, the city lights blurring beyond the glass. His jacket hung forgotten on the back of his chair. The coffee beside him had gone cold hours ago. He wasn't planning to check the cameras. He was reviewing contracts, preparing for the morning, when a notification lit up his phone. Motion detected in the sitting room. Out of habit more than concern, he opened the app. He expected to see Brenda making her rounds or the house settling into its usual stillness. What he saw instead made him forget everything else. The sitting room glowed softly from a single lamp near the window. The television was dark. The room held that particular quiet that had settled over the house since his mother's stroke, the quiet of a life being carefully managed rather than truly lived. But that silence had been broken. Maya was dancing. She moved through the center of the room with complete unself-consciousness, the way a person moves when they believe no one is watching. Her arms swayed loosely, her feet light on the hardwood, her shoulders rolling to the rhythm of an old Motown song. The kind Vivian used to hum in the kitchen when Landon was a boy, and the world still felt wide open and kind. And there was Vivian, watching her. Not with the tired, distant gaze of someone enduring the next task or the next medication, but with her whole face alive. Her left hand, the one that still worked, tapped gently on the wheelchair armrest in time with the music. Then she laughed, a real laugh, the kind that rose from somewhere deep and long buried. Landon had not heard his mother laugh in what felt like forever. He knew the weight of that silence the way you know things you try not to look at directly because facing them straight on can break something you're not ready to lose. He had done everything he knew how to do. He had hired the finest rehabilitation team, brought in specialists from across the country, transformed the entire first floor of their Lincoln Park home into an accessible space, and spent more than most people earned in years trying to fix what had been broken. He had attacked the problem the only way he understood, with resources, with systems, with relentless management. None of it had brought back her laughter. Maya stopped dancing, not because she sensed she was being watched, but because she turned toward Vivian and said something the silent footage couldn't capture. She was smiling. Vivian was smiling back. Maya reached out and took her left hand, holding it not like a caregiver checking vitals, but like someone simply glad to be in the same room, sharing the moment. Then she turned the wheelchair so Vivian faced the window and sat cross-legged on the floor beside her, talking quietly. Vivian's shoulders shook with another wave of silent laughter. Landon sat at his desk and watched the screen for a long time, unable to look away. He set the phone down, picked it up again, thought about calling the house, thought about what he would even say. He couldn't remember the last time he had truly sat in that sitting room with his mother, not checked in, not reviewed notes, not stood in the doorway for a few minutes before rushing to the next obligation. He remembered managing her care with precision, therapy reports, medication adjustments, schedule changes. He had been efficient, systematic, but he could not remember the last time he had asked her how she was, not medically, not functionally, but really how she was in the quiet spaces of her heart. He grabbed his jacket, left the contracts on the desk, told the night security guard he would return in the morning, and took the elevator down. On the street, the cool night air wrapped around him, but he barely felt it. All he could see was his mother's hand tapping on the armrest, still reaching for music, still waiting for someone to notice she was still there inside. He didn't go home. He told himself it was too late, that morning would come soon enough, that whatever was happening could wait. He told himself many things on the drive to his apartment that he didn't entirely believe. What stayed with him was the image of that hand, the realization that she was still listening, still wanting, still waiting. He sat in the dark car for a long time after parking, trying to remember the last time he had asked his mother a question that wasn't about her body or her schedule. He knew every detail of her medical chart, every specialist's name, every medication. He did not know what she dreamed about now. He did not know if she missed teaching after 31 years in the classroom. He did not know if she turned on the radio when no one was around. He did not know what she might have shared with Maya, the woman he had hired only weeks earlier after a brief interview. He went upstairs. In the quiet kitchen, he drank a glass of water and looked out at the glowing city, the buildings he had helped shape and bring into being. He was exceptional at building things. He had always been. But this was something else entirely. Sleep did not come easily. The next morning, he opened the app again. The sitting room appeared empty in the pale early light. The wheelchair sat angled toward the window, toward the trees and the open sky, not facing the door as Brenda had always left it. That small difference mattered more than he could explain. It meant someone had thought about what Vivian might want to see, not just what was practical for the next appointment. The lamp by the window was still glowing. Maya had either forgotten to turn it off or left it on intentionally. He couldn't decide which, and the uncertainty stayed with him longer than it should have. He made coffee. He considered calling the house but decided against it. He wasn't the kind of man who did unnecessary things. Then he opened his calendar and moved his first meeting. He needed to go to the house and see it with new eyes. Not as a problem he had already solved with money and planning, but as a place where something quiet and important was happening, something he didn't want to miss. When he had first interviewed Maya for the position, he arrived early, as he always did. He walked through the adapted spaces quickly. The kitchen, the sitting room, the accessible bathroom, the bedroom now filled with medical equipment Vivian called all that nonsense. He made a mental note about a burned-out bulb in the hallway. He sat at the dining room table with her resume and read it again. She had a degree in health sciences, years of experience as a live-in caregiver for an elderly couple where the husband had Parkinson's and the wife had recovered from hip surgery, time as a patient support coordinator at a rehabilitation clinic. There was a gap in employment a couple of years earlier with no explanation. He had circled it, intending to ask. He had 2 other candidates with stronger clinical credentials scheduled later, but something had made him interview Maya first. When she arrived, she stood on the front step with a calm, steady expression, the kind that comes from deciding to face whatever happens next without flinching. She was younger than he had expected. "Mr. Hale, not a question." "Come in." They sat at the table. Landon worked through his questions methodically. Her approach to care routines, experience with stroke recovery and partial paralysis, how she handled emergencies, her availability, her references. Maya answered directly, without unnecessary elaboration or self-promotion. He found it either impressive or slightly irritating and couldn't quite decide which. "You've worked with patients who have communication difficulties," he said. "Yes. My mother's speech was significantly affected by the stroke. She has good days and bad days. On bad days, she can be frustrated." "That's reasonable. I'm telling you it can be difficult. I understand. I've worked with people who couldn't speak at all." She held his gaze. "Frustration is reasonable. It doesn't make it difficult. It makes it honest." He looked at her for a moment, then moved to the next question. They were deep into the interview when the front door opened without a knock. Ruthie came in carrying a covered dish that smelled of sweet potato pie, set it on the counter like she lived there, and pulled out a chair. "Don't mind me," she said. "I'm just dropping this off." She sat and looked at Maya with sharp, assessing interest. "You're interviewing for the position." Maya glanced at Landon. "Yes, ma'am." "What's your name?" "Maya Ellison." "Where are you from originally?" "Southside. My parents are from Ghana." Ruthie nodded slowly. "Can you cook?" "Ruthie," Landon started, "I'm asking because Vivian has opinions about food, and the last woman they brought in made oatmeal that tasted like something you'd use to patch a wall." She looked at Maya. "Can you cook?" "I can cook. Not everything, but enough. West African dishes, some American rice, soups, stews. I make a good jollof." Ruthie's expression shifted, considering. She turned to Landon. "She knows what jollof is." "That's a start." "This is a professional interview," Landon said. Ruthie turned back to Maya. "Vivian can be stubborn, especially on days when her speech isn't cooperating. What do you do when someone gets frustrated and can't express why?" Maya didn't hesitate. "I stop talking and stay in the room. Most people just need someone to not leave." Ruthie was quiet for a moment. Then she stood, smoothed her coat, and picked up her bag. "That's the right answer." She looked at Landon. She's the one you want. I have 2 other candidates. I've told you what I think. She moved toward the hallway, then stopped. Also, the bulb in the hallway is out. Vivian's going to trip. Fix it. She went upstairs. Landon looked at the empty chair, then at Maya, who was clearly trying not to smile. I apologize, he said. She's my mother's neighbor. She seems like she loves her. She has no boundaries. Those 2 things can coexist. He looked at her again. There was that quality. Direct, but not combative. Like someone who had thought carefully about what they were willing to say and what they weren't. He moved to the final questions. The employment gap. You have a period here with no listed employer a couple of years ago. Something moved through Maya's face, fast, disciplined, gone. Personal circumstances. Can you be more specific? I had a family matter that required my full attention. I returned to work when I was able. Landon held her gaze. In years of conducting interviews, he had learned to distinguish between someone hiding something problematic and someone protecting something private. Something in the way she held herself, straight-backed, completely still, not defensive but not open either, told him this was the second category. He made a note. He did not press further. The interview ended soon after. He walked her to the door. As she stepped outside, she turned and looked at the house again. The old limestone facade, the trees turning with the season. Your mother, she said, what was she like before the stroke? The question surprised him. In all the months of hiring and managing his mother's care team, not one person had asked him that. A teacher, he said after a moment. High school English, 31 years. Maya nodded, looking at the house. She must have a lot of patience. She has more than I do. That's not unusual, she said without any particular edge, and walked down the steps. He stood in the doorway and watched her go. Then he went back inside and sat at the table, looking at the other candidates' files for a long time. He called her references that afternoon. He called her that evening to offer her the position. In the weeks that followed, Maya learned the rhythms of the house the way you learn a song. Not by reading it, but by living inside it long enough that the beats become part of you. She knew when Vivian slept lightly and when she slept deeply, and that waking her too early was the fastest way to start the day wrong. She knew the physical therapy sessions left her exhausted and quiet for the afternoon, and that the best thing was to be present without demanding anything. She knew the window shade had to be exactly halfway, not open, not closed. Because if someone moved it without asking, Vivian would look at it for a long time without saying anything, which was worse than words. She knew these things because she had watched, because she had sat in the room and paid attention instead of just completing tasks and moving on. What she also noticed, and hadn't told anyone yet, was the music. It started on one of her early days. She had been moving through the sitting room with the cleaning cart, one earbud in, and an old Marvin Gaye song came on. The kind her aunt used to play on Sunday mornings. Without thinking, she started to hum. She turned to find Vivian watching her. Not the unfocused gaze of diminished attention, but sharp, tracking something specific. And Vivian's left hand was moving on the armrest, small but there. Maya pulled out her earbud. You know this one? Vivian's mouth moved. The words didn't come. They often didn't. But her expression was clear. She knew the song. She knew it in her body before she knew it in language. Maya went to her bag, pulled out the small Bluetooth speaker she used in the kitchen, brought it in, and played the record from the beginning. She watched Vivian's hand the whole time. By the second verse, it was tapping. By the end, something in Vivian's posture had changed. The chronic tightness across her shoulders, the brace of someone always waiting for the next difficult thing, had eased by a small but real degree. Maya noted it quietly without making a performance of it. After that, music became part of the daily routine. Not scheduled, not formal, nothing that went into the care log. Just the speaker in the sitting room or kitchen. Old soul and R&B and sometimes gospel when the afternoon light felt right. Maya moved through the house and the music moved with her, and Vivian tracked it like a plant tracking the light. Her attention sharper on the days the music was there. The speech therapist noticed at one session. Vivian completed a sequence she had been struggling with. The therapist asked what had changed. Maya mentioned the music in the afternoons and mornings. The therapist considered it. The research on music therapy and stroke recovery is strong. It activates different neural pathways. Keep doing it and note which songs get the strongest response. I want to incorporate that into the sessions. Maya agreed. She had already been keeping an informal list on her phone. Brenda's reaction was different. She found Maya in the kitchen one afternoon, the speaker playing. Vivian visible through the doorway, head tilted toward the sound. The music in the common areas, Brenda said. It needs to be kept at a reasonable volume. Auditory overstimulation can be counterproductive for stroke patients. Maya turned the speaker down 2 notches. Of course. And I'd prefer the activity changes go through me before they're implemented. I'm responsible for her overall care plan. Understood. Maya folded the dish towel. Dr. Lawson was supportive of it, if that's useful to know. Brenda's expression didn't change. I'm aware of what Dr. Lawson said. I'm telling you what I prefer. Of course, Maya said again, the same tone. Not deferential, not combative, simply present. Brenda left. Maya turned the speaker back up 1 notch. At the next physical therapy session, the therapist mentioned that Vivian's range of motion on the left side had shown measurable improvement. Not dramatic, but real and documented. He asked what had changed. Maya told him the same thing. Nothing dramatic, I've just been paying attention. She didn't mention the evenings after Brenda left, when the house grew quiet. She had started sitting with Vivian in the sitting room. Not to run exercises or check medications, just to sit. Sometimes she talked, sometimes Vivian responded, sometimes Maya put on a record and said nothing, and Vivian would close her eyes, and her face would go somewhere else entirely. Some version of herself the stroke had not touched. Those were the best hours, the ones that didn't go in any chart. Maya hadn't brought any of this to Landon. She had seen him only twice since starting. Once to review the care log. Once when he stopped in briefly on his way to a meeting. She had watched from the kitchen doorway as he stood at Vivian's threshold like someone unsure if he was allowed to enter, hands in his pockets, looking at his mother the way you look at something that cost you something just to see. She recognized it, the guilt of someone who loved a person and had forgotten how to be in the room with them. She turned back to the kitchen and started on dinner. Tristan came home without calling ahead. That was the first thing Landon noticed. He found out the way he found out about most things Tristan did, after the fact, from someone else. In this case, a text from Brenda. A man named Tristan Hale arrived at the house. He says he's your brother. I've let him in. Please advise. Landon felt the familiar sensation Tristan always produced. A low, tired alertness. Like a smoke alarm going off in a building you know probably isn't on fire, but you can't quite ignore. He called Brenda back. She confirmed. Tristan had arrived in a taxi with a single bag, said he'd been meaning to visit for a long time, gone straight upstairs to see their mother. He'd been there for a while. He seemed, Brenda said carefully, in good spirits. Landon told her he'd be there soon. He arrived faster than expected. Tristan was sitting at the dining room table when Landon walked in, with a cup of coffee and the easy, unhurried posture of a man who felt welcome. He was lighter built than Landon, with their mother's eyes and their father's habit of making every room feel slightly more crowded. He had a creative director's beard and the kind of jacket that looked expensive without trying too hard. He stood when Landon came in and spread his arms wide. There he is. Landon shook his hand, did not go in for the hug. When did you get in? This afternoon. I should have called. I know. Tristan sat back down, utterly untroubled. I just thought I've been meaning to come, and if I plan it too much, I'll plan around it. You know how I am. Landon did know how Tristan was. He pulled out a chair and sat down. How long are you staying? Just a few days. I wanted to see Mom. He wrapped both hands around the coffee mug. How is she really? Brenda gives me these clinical answers. All percentages and therapy milestones. She's improving slowly. She seemed good. She was happy to see me. Tristan smiled, and the smile was genuine. Whatever else he was, he did love their mother. She said my name clear as anything. Landon looked at him. Vivian had said Tristan's name clearly. He filed that away. Maya's been working with her on speech. The new one? Yeah, I met her. Tristan glanced toward the kitchen where sounds of dinner preparation had been coming steadily. She seems good, different from the last one. Different how? Tristan considered. Less like a hospital and more like a person. He said it without apparent intention, the way he often arrived at accurate observations accidentally. Anyway, tell me about the riverfront project. I saw the renderings online. It looks significant. They talked for a while, mostly about work. Tristan had a studio now, graphic design, some art direction for a music label. He was vague about the details the way he'd always been vague about money. Landon listened and asked occasional questions and waited. At dinner, Maya set roasted chicken, rice, and a simple salad on the table. And Ruthie appeared through the back door with another dish, saw Tristan, and stopped. "Tristan Hale," she said, not warmly, not coldly, the way you say the name of a person you've been cataloging for years. Tristan stood and spread his arms again. "Ruthie, you look exactly the same?" "Mm-hmm." She set her dish down, took a seat, and examined him the way a customs agent examines a bag that set off an alert. "What brings you to Chicago?" "Wanted to see Mom." "Uh-huh." She looked at Landon, then back at Tristan. "When's the last time you were here?" "It's been a while, I'll be honest." "February," Ruthie said. "That was over a year ago. I remember because it was the week after Vivian's birthday, and you missed her birthday and showed up a week late with flowers from a gas station." She picked up her fork. "Just wanted to establish the timeline." Tristan laughed, the practiced, disarming laugh of a man who had been navigating people like Ruthie his entire life. "Fair enough. I've been better about staying in touch, though. We talk on the phone." "That's nice," Ruthie said. "Phones are useful." She served herself rice. "How long are you staying this time?" "A few days." "Uh-huh." She glanced at Maya, who was bringing Vivian's adapted plate from the kitchen. "The girl's gotten Vivian eating properly again. You notice she's got more color?" "She does look better," Tristan agreed, "because someone's been paying attention." Ruthie set it to the table, not to anyone specific, with the accuracy of a woman who always knows exactly who she's talking to. Landon picked up his fork. The conversation moved through dinner in the way family dinners do. Current events, old memories, a story about a cousin, a small argument about whether their father had preferred the north side or the south side, which was resolved when Vivian, who had been listening with her eyes in the left side of her face since she'd been wheeled to the table, made a sound that was clearly a laugh at both her sons for arguing about it. After dinner, Landon helped Maya clear the plates. Tristan drifted back to the dining room table with his coffee. Landon came back from the kitchen and paused in the doorway. Tristan was looking at the bookshelves, the ones that lined the far wall. Old family photos mixed in with Vivian's decades of collected paperbacks. He had his phone out. He was not taking a photo of the books. He was looking at something else on the screen. When he heard Landon's step, he put the phone away smoothly, too smoothly, and picked up his coffee. "Still the same wallpaper," Tristan said, nodding at the dining room wall. "Mom likes it." "Sure." He took a sip. "Hey, this place must cost a lot to run. The full-time care, the house maintenance, it's a significant operation." "It is." Tristan nodded slowly, studying the room. "Dad left things pretty well organized from what I remember." "He did." Landon stood in the doorway. He did not move toward the table. Tristan looked up and smiled. "I'm just saying, it's a lot for one person to manage." "I manage it fine." "I know you do." Tristan held up a hand. "I know. You always have." He set the mug down. "It'd just be good to understand the full picture as a family." Landon looked at his brother for a long moment. Tristan looked back with the same open, reasonable expression he'd been wearing all evening. The face of a man who simply wanted to understand the situation, who had nothing but good intentions, who was just asking. "We can talk tomorrow," Landon said. He turned and went back to the kitchen. Behind him, Ruthie's voice came from the sitting room, where she'd gone to help settle Vivian for the evening. She was talking to Vivian in the low, easy murmur of two women who'd been having the same conversations for years. Landon couldn't hear what she said. He heard Vivian laugh. He stayed in the kitchen a few minutes longer than he needed to, washing a pan that was already clean just to keep listening to that sound. The first real conversation happened a couple of days later. Landon had told himself he was coming to check on Tristan. That was the reason he gave himself on the drive over. He parked on the street and let himself in through the front. The house was quiet in that middle of the afternoon way. Brenda's car was not out front. Maya's shift ran later. He stood in the entrance and heard voices. Not voices, one voice, Maya's. And then, underneath it, lower, slower, effortful, but clear, his mother's. He moved down the hallway without thinking, stopped just short of the sitting room doorway, and stayed there. They were at the window. Vivian in her wheelchair angled toward the glass, the trees mostly bare now. Maya was sitting on the low ottoman beside her, close enough that their knees were almost touching. She had a paperback open in her lap, but she wasn't reading from it. She was talking. "He wrote the whole thing in 6 weeks, Maya was saying. 6 weeks. And it's not like it's a short book either." Vivian's left hand moved, a gesture somewhere between skepticism and amusement. "I know," Maya said, responding to the gesture like it was a sentence. "I thought the same thing, but then I read it, and I understood why it came fast. Some things are already written in you before you sit down." Vivian looked at the window. Then she said something. 3 words, maybe 4. Landon couldn't catch all of them from the hallway, but he caught the last one. "Teacher." "You used it in class?" Maya asked. Vivian's head moved. "Yes." "What grade?" Vivian's mouth worked for a moment, then 11th. The word came out clear, not perfect. There was still the slight drag on the consonants that the stroke had left behind, but clear enough that Landon felt it in his chest like a struck note. Maya smiled. 11th grade is the right age for it. Old enough to understand why it hurts, young enough to still be surprised that it does. Vivian laughed, the same laugh from the security footage, not the careful, polite laugh of a woman performing wellness for a visiting son, but the real one. Short, bright, her whole left side involved. Landon stayed in the hallway. He stayed there for another few minutes, his hand moving to his wrist the way it always did when he needed something to do with himself. He stood against the wall and listened to his mother talk. Not fluently. There were pauses, resets, moments when the word didn't come, and Maya waited without filling the silence. And then the word came, or something close to it did, and the conversation continued. It was slow, and it was real, and it was more than Landon had heard from his mother in longer than he could remember combined. When Maya finally looked up, she saw him. She didn't startle. She looked at him the way she'd looked at him in the interview. A moment of assessment, clean and unhurried. And then she looked at Vivian and said, "Your son is here," in the same tone she'd been using for the whole conversation, like it was simply the next piece of information. Vivian turned her head. When she saw Landon, her face shifted into something complicated. Pleasure. And underneath it, something that might have been guilt. And underneath that, something that looked almost like relief, as if she'd been waiting for him to arrive for a long time and had stopped expecting it. "Hi, Mom." He stepped into the room. He pulled a chair over and sat down across from her, which was not what he usually did. Usually, he stood. He wasn't sure why he usually stood. Vivian reached out her left hand and put it on his arm. He covered it with his. They sat like that for a moment. Then Landon looked at Maya, who was still on the ottoman, the paperback closed in her lap, clearly preparing to give them the room. "You don't have to go," he said. She stilled. "I want to ask you something." He looked at his mother, then back at Maya. "What did you do?" Maya looked at him. "I'm not sure what you mean. A while ago, her speech therapist called me. Said there'd been measurable improvement. The physical therapist said the same thing recently. Brenda's notes don't reflect any changes in the care plan, so I want to know what changed." Maya was quiet for a moment, then she said, "I played music." Landon waited. She responds to music. It was visible from the first week. Her attention sharpens, her motor responses improve, her mood stabilizes. I started incorporating it into the daily routine. I spoke with Dr. Lawson about it. She was supportive. A pause. I should have documented it and reported the change through the proper channel. That was my error. "Brenda?" "Yes." Landon looked at his mother, who was watching this exchange with her whole face, tracking it the way she'd always tracked a conversation in a room, a teacher's attention calibrated to what was actually being communicated beneath the words. "The proper channel matters," he said. "I need to know what happens in this house. I understand, but I'm not saying it was wrong. I'm saying I want to be informed." Maya nodded. He looked at Vivian. "Is there anything else that she's noticed, that she's been doing that isn't in the care logs?" Vivian's left hand moved on his arm, a light pressure. He looked at her. She met his eyes and held them for a moment. Then she said slowly, with effort but with absolute clarity, She stays. Not she stays late or she stays to help, just she stays. Landon held his mother's gaze. He understood what she was telling him. Maya stayed in the evenings, after Brenda left, after the schedule ended. She stayed and sat in the room with Vivian, not because she was paid to, but because she had decided to. And whatever was happening with Vivian's recovery, the measurables, the charted improvements, the things the therapists were now calling progress, had something to do with that, with simply not being left alone. He looked at Maya. She was watching him with the same composed expression she always wore. But there was something underneath it now. Not defensiveness, not apology. Something braced, like a person waiting to be told to stop doing the thing they know they shouldn't stop doing. "The overtime," he said finally. "Make sure you're logging the additional hours. You'll be compensated." Something in Maya's posture released slightly. "Thank you." "And document the music protocol. What songs, what times, what responses. I want it in the weekly report going forward." "I will." Landon nodded. He didn't get up. He stayed in the chair across from his mother, and for the next while he did not check his phone, did not think about work or Tristan or anything else. And when Vivian's speech faltered, he waited, really waited without filling the space or moving toward the door, until she found the word herself. She always found the word. It just needed time. He'd been in too much of a hurry to learn that. When he finally stood to leave, Vivian caught his hand again. She looked up at him and said 2 words. They came out whole and even, the clearest thing she'd said all afternoon. "Come back." Not a question, not a request exactly. A statement about what she needed and what she knew he was capable of if he decided to be. Landon bent down and pressed his forehead to hers for just a moment, something he hadn't done since he was a boy and the world was a different size, and said, "I will." He meant it. Ruthie brought it up on a morning when the first real cold of the season pushed in off the lake. That was how it happened. Not through any deliberate investigation, not through anything Landon did or asked, but because Ruthie had been carrying the information for several weeks and had decided that Landon had earned the right to know. He had come to the house before Brenda arrived, which was new. He'd been doing that, coming earlier, staying longer, rescheduling fewer things. Ruthie had noticed. Ruthie noticed everything, cataloged it, and drew conclusions that were usually correct and occasionally devastating. She found him in the kitchen making coffee and sat down at the table the way she always sat, like she'd been there before he arrived and would be there after he left. "You've been asking about Maya," she said. Landon looked at her. "I ask about all the staff. Not the way you've been asking." She folded her hands. "Vivian told me you stayed a long time the other day. My mother is improving. I want to understand what's contributing to it." "Uh-huh." Ruthie looked at him with the patience of a woman who had developed an unshakable tolerance for people who said one thing and meant another. "There's something you should know about her, about why she took this job." Landon set his mug down. "If there's something relevant to her employment," Ruthie's voice was even, "it's about why she's the way she is, why she stays in the evenings, why she's good at sitting with your mother without making it about herself." She paused. "A couple of years ago, Maya lost a baby. A daughter, 4 months old, a heart condition, congenital. Nothing anyone could have predicted or prevented. She was there. She held her when it happened." She looked at the table. "After that, she left her job, moved back in with her aunt on the south side, and took some time to put herself back together, which she did, quietly and mostly alone." Landon stood at the counter and did not move. "She took this job because she needed somewhere to be useful, somewhere quiet, a house, a person who needed tending, work that made sense in her hands. She wasn't looking for a career move. She was looking for a reason to get up in the morning that didn't require her to explain herself to anyone." Landon thought about the interview, the employment gap he'd circled, personal circumstances. He thought about the way she'd answered, straight-backed, completely still, not defensive. He thought about the question she'd asked on the front step as she left. What was she like before the stroke? He'd thought at the time it was professional curiosity. "Vivian knows," Ruthie said. Landon looked at her. "She told her?" "Vivian figured it out. You know how she is. She was a teacher for 31 years. She can read a person in 20 minutes. Ruthie's voice softened slightly. "And I think Maya needed someone to know, someone who wasn't going to fix it or manage it or turn it into a care plan, someone who would just know." Landon was quiet for a long moment. Through the doorway he could hear the sound of Maya moving in the sitting room, the quiet rearrangement of a morning routine, the low notes of something playing from the speaker. His mother's voice, brief and low, and Maya's response. "Why are you telling me this?" he said. "Because you're starting to see her," Ruthie said simply. "And when you start to see someone, you should know who they actually are. Not the resume, not the care logs." She stood, smoothed her coat. "And because your mother wants you to understand why this one matters, why you shouldn't do what you usually do." "What do I usually do?" Ruthie looked at him. "You manage things until they work, and then you move on to the next thing." She picked up her bag. "This isn't a thing, Landon. This is a person who showed up in your mother's life at the exact right moment and gave her something back that the rest of you, the doctors, the therapists, even you, didn't know how to give her." She moved toward the hallway. "So just be careful with it." She left. Landon stood in the kitchen for a while. The coffee had gone lukewarm. He didn't drink it. He thought about Maya in the sitting room with his mother every evening, the paperback in her lap, the music low, and what it must cost to do that. To sit willingly in rooms with people who were diminished, people whose bodies had failed them in slow and grinding ways, when you had already held the worst loss of your own life in your arms and walked back into the world afterward. What kind of person did that make you? What kind of person you had to already be for that to be possible? He went to the sitting room doorway. Maya was adjusting the angle of the window shade exactly halfway, the way Vivian liked it. She saw him and straightened. "Good morning." She had a good night. Slept through until later. "Good." He stood in the doorway. "I wanted to thank you for the other day for being direct with me about what's been happening." Maya studied him for a moment. "You didn't come here to say that." It wasn't confrontational. It was simply precise. The same quality she'd had in the interview. That exact location of the true thing without cruelty. Landon looked at his mother, who was watching him from the wheelchair with her teacher's attention, and then back at Maya. "No," he admitted. "I came because I've been coming. I don't have a better explanation than that." Something crossed Maya's face, not softening exactly, but an opening, like a window moved to its right position. "She's been asking about you," she said. "In the mornings, when she wakes up and I'm getting her ready for the day. Sometimes she asks when you're coming." Landon absorbed this. He thought about the security footage again. His mother's hand on the armrest, tapping in time, still listening, still waiting for someone to notice she was in the room. "I'll be here tomorrow," he said. "And the next day." Maya nodded. She turned back to the window. Then she said, without looking at him, "She asked me once what I missed most about my daughter." Landon went very still. "I told her I missed the weight of her, how she felt in my arms." She kept her eyes on the window, the bare trees, the gray morning sky. "Your mother held my hand when I said it. She didn't say anything. She just held my hand." A pause. "I've worked with a lot of people. Nobody's done that before." The sitting room was quiet. The speaker on the bookshelf was playing something low, an old Aretha record barely above a whisper. Landon didn't say anything either. He understood, maybe for the first time, what his mother had known for weeks, that Maya wasn't here in spite of what she'd lost. She was here because of it, because grief, if it doesn't break you completely, has a way of teaching you exactly how to stay. He had been managing her like a resource, logging her hours, reviewing her reports, processing her contributions to Vivian's recovery, the way he processed everything, efficiently, at a distance from the objective side of the data. He had not thought about what she carried into the room with her every single day, what it took to make yourself useful to someone else's grief when you were still learning to carry your own. He thought about Brenda, the specialists, the rehabilitation team, all of it real, all of it necessary, none of it sufficient. And then this woman had walked in with a speaker and a paperback and the knowledge of what it felt like to need someone to stay, and she had given Vivian back something none of the rest of them knew how to give. Not better credentials, just the understanding from the inside of what it meant to be the person waiting. He went to his mother. He sat down. He stayed for a long time. Tristan had been in Chicago for over a week when he found Maya alone in the kitchen. He'd extended his stay twice, first by a couple of days, then by more, each time with a different explanation. A client call he couldn't take elsewhere. a problem with his flight, a general sense that it was good to be here, that Mom seemed better, that he wanted to make sure things were stable before he headed back. Landon had listened to each extension with the same even expression and said nothing because there was nothing yet to say. Tristan hadn't done anything. He was simply present in the way that Tristan was always present, filling space, asking questions, being charming, being a brother. But he was asking too many questions about the wrong things, and Landon had noticed. It was an afternoon when Landon was at the office. Brenda was at a medical supply appointment, Vivian resting after her therapy session. Maya was making soup, a simple vegetable broth that Vivian had been able to take more easily than solid food on tired days, when Tristan came into the kitchen and sat down at the island. "That smells good," he said. "Thank you." He watched her work for a moment. Tristan had a way of watching that was meant to feel relaxed. Leaned back, arms loose, the posture of a man with nowhere to be. But Maya had been reading rooms her entire working life, and she felt the attention in it, directed, purposeful. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Go ahead. How do you find it here, working for Landon?" Maya stirred the pot. "It's a good position. He can be demanding. I know that better than most." Tristan picked up a pen from the counter and turned it over in his fingers. Another habit. The fidgeting of a man who thought better when his hands were occupied. He has very specific expectations, and he doesn't always communicate them clearly before he decides you've fallen short of them. "I haven't had that experience." "No?" He sounded genuinely curious. "He's been coming around more lately. I've noticed. That's new. He used to let Brenda run everything and check in once in a while. Mrs. Hale is improving. He wants to be involved." Tristan set the pen down. "He's not easy to work for, though. You probably know that. The way he monitors things and the cameras, the logs, all of it. Must feel like a lot of oversight." Maya glanced at him briefly, then back at the pot. "I understand why the oversight exists." Tristan nodded slowly, as if she'd confirmed something. He was quiet for a moment, the calculated quiet of someone assembling a next sentence carefully. Then, "Here's the thing, Maya, and I'm saying this as someone who cares about this family. I'm a little worried about my mother's situation, about the decisions being made around her care, who has input, who doesn't. I'm sure those concerns are better directed at your brother than at me. I've tried talking to Landon. You know how that goes." He leaned forward slightly, dropping his voice into something more confidential. "The truth is, he's made some decisions around Mom's care arrangements, around the house, around who's responsible for what, that I'm not entirely comfortable with, and I think it would help me to understand from someone who's actually here every day whether things are being run the way they should be." Maya took the pot off the heat. She turned and faced him directly, which Tristan hadn't expected. He'd been talking to her profile, and her full attention had a different weight. "I understand what you're asking," she said, "and the answer is no." Tristan blinked. "I'm not asking you to do anything. You're asking me to report on Landon, on his decisions, his behavior, his state of mind. You're asking me to be a source." She kept her voice level, not cold, not heated, the same tone she used for everything, matter of fact, like gravity. "I won't do that, not for any reason." Tristan was quiet for a moment. Then he tried again, more openly. "I'm prepared to compensate you separately from whatever Landon is paying, just for your honest observations. Nothing that would compromise your position." "Stop." She said it simply, the way you say stop to something that doesn't need more explanation than that. "I work for this family. I'm not going to be used against any part of it, and if you bring this up again, I'll tell Landon you asked." Tristan looked at her for a long moment. The charm had gone quiet. Not gone because it was too ingrained in him to disappear entirely, but recalibrated, the way a flashlight dims when it hits something that doesn't reflect. "Fair enough," he said finally. He stood, picked up his coffee. "I hope I didn't offend you." "You didn't," Maya said, which was true. She wasn't offended. She was tired of people who thought that caregivers were invisible, that because someone cooked the soup and changed the linens and stayed in the evenings, they could be recruited without consequence, handled without resistance, moved like a piece on a board. Tristan left the kitchen. Maya ladled the soup into a container and put it in the refrigerator and stood at the counter for a moment, thinking. She had said she would tell Landon if it happened again. She hadn't said she wouldn't tell him now. She thought about whether to. She weighed it the way she weighed most things, not against what was easy, but against what was true. Tristan was positioning himself for something. She didn't know the specifics, but she understood the architecture of it. He wanted information, which meant he wanted leverage, which meant there was something he intended to do with it. And whatever that was, it involved Vivian. It involved this house. She picked up her phone and looked at it for a moment. Then she thought about what Vivian had said a couple of days ago in the sitting room during one of their afternoon conversations. They'd been talking about her sons, Landon and Tristan both, the way a mother talks about children she loves who are entirely different from each other. Vivian had said something that had taken Maya a moment to fully parse, slowly, with effort, 2 words at a time, but when she assembled it, it was exact. Tristan wants, Landon worries. Both of them love me. Only one of them knows what that means. Maya put her phone back in her pocket. She would wait. She would watch. And the moment Tristan's positioning moved from talk into action, she would make sure Landon knew every detail. That evening, after Brenda left and Vivian was settled, Maya sat in the sitting room and put on a record and didn't mention Tristan at all. Vivian didn't ask. She rested her head back and closed her eyes and let the music hold her. And Maya sat on the ottoman and kept her company. And the house was quiet in the way it was only quiet when it felt like enough. A few days later, Tristan called a lawyer. He didn't tell anyone in the house. He used his cell phone on the front steps early one morning when the street was empty and the cold came off the lake in long gray gusts. And he spoke with a family law attorney who specialized in estate disputes and guardianship challenges. Landon found out about it a few days after that from a contact who knew the attorney's office. But that was still days away. For now, the house didn't know yet. The soup was in the refrigerator, the music was low, and Vivian Hale slept well, which was the only measurement that mattered at the end of any given day. It was an evening when the sitting room was warm, the lamp on, and an Aretha record playing low. Maya had put it on before she left for the evening, then slipped out quietly when Landon arrived, making room the way she always did now without being asked. Landon had brought soup from a place his mother used to like. He set it on the table by her chair and pulled his own chair close, the way he'd been doing lately. Close enough that her left hand could reach his arm if she wanted to. She waited until he'd eaten something. She'd always done that. Fed people before she asked anything of them. 31 years in a classroom had taught her that no one thought well on an empty stomach. Then she said, "Sit." He was already sitting. She meant it differently. "Be still. Be here. Stop organizing yourself for what comes next." He understood. He put down the container. He looked at her. Vivian Hale took a breath that was also a gathering. The specific breath of a woman who had been forming a sentence in her body for days and was finally ready to let it out. When she spoke, it came slowly, but it came. "I am not afraid," she said, "of dying." Landon went still. "I want you to know that." Her left hand moved on the armrest. "I have made my peace with God, with your father, with the things I did not do in time." A pause. A reset. The words came in their own rhythm, unhurried, like water finding its level. "But I'm afraid of being invisible." The room was quiet except for Aretha barely above a whisper. "Since the stroke," Vivian said, "people come, they check, they do the things, then they leave." Her eyes were steady on his. Vivian's eyes had always been her most undiminished feature, dark and precise and entirely present. "I am still here inside this." She lifted her left hand slightly, indicating the body that had failed her in increments. "Still thinking, still remembering, still—" She paused, searching. "Still wanting." Landon said nothing. He had learned over the recent weeks how to not fill her silences. It had been the hardest thing he'd ever practiced. "No one asked me," she said, "what I wanted after everyone decided." She looked at him. "You decided. You are good at deciding." He absorbed this. "I thought I was helping." "You were." She held his gaze. "And you were also somewhere else." She touched her chest. "Here, you were somewhere else." He looked at his hands. He had his father's hands. Broad, capable, built for work. He had spent years doing things with them and very little just holding on. "Mom," he said, "I'm sorry." She reached out and covered his hand with hers. The gesture was slow. Her reach was always slow now, but it was deliberate, and it landed with the weight of everything she just said and everything she hadn't needed to say. "I know," she said. "I know you are." A beat. "That is why I'm telling you, because sorry is the beginning, not the end." From the hallway, from the chair just around the corner where she had been sitting with a magazine for the past while, not going anywhere, not making a sound, came a single audible sniff. Landon looked up, another sniff. Then the unmistakable sound of Ruthie locating a tissue in the bottom of a large bag. Vivian's face moved. The left side, the side that worked, pulled into something that was unmistakably a smile. "Ruthie?" she said. "I'm not here," Ruthie said from the hallway. Her voice was thick. "I'm not listening. I'm reading my magazine. Don't mind me." "How long have you been there?" Landon asked. "Since before you arrived." A pause. Rustling. Another sniff. "The soup smelled good, and I wanted to see if you were going to eat it or just hold it like a prop." "This is a private conversation," Landon said. "Private conversations shouldn't happen in houses where I have a key." More rustling. The sound of a magazine being set down. "Also, I am an emotional wreck right now, so everyone please give me a moment." Vivian was laughing. Both sides trying. The right side limited, but the effort real. Her shoulders moving and her eyes bright and full. She hadn't laughed this hard in front of Landon before. He hadn't been there for it before. He looked at his mother laughing and felt something loosen in his chest that had been locked for a long time. "Ruthie?" he said. And his voice was different now, the careful professional register gone. "Do you want to come in?" A pause. "I wasn't going to intrude." "You're already intruding." "That's fair." She appeared in the doorway, tissue in hand, coat still on, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She looked at Vivian, who was still laughing quietly. "You didn't have to tell him all of that right this second, you know. We had a plan." "There was a plan?" Landon looked at his mother. Vivian's shoulders moved again. "She helped me practice." "You practiced?" "A woman who taught speech for 31 years, Ruthie said, settling into the chair in the corner with the composure of someone resuming a meeting they'd never officially left, "does not have important conversations without preparing." She pointed at him. "You should know that about your mother." Landon looked at Vivian. Vivian looked back at him with her full, dark, undiminished eyes. And there was something in her expression now that hadn't been there when the evening started. Not relief exactly, but the particular ease of a person who has been carrying something important and has finally set it down in the right hands. "Tell me something," Landon said. "Something I don't know about you." Vivian considered. Her hand was still on his. She looked at the window, at the dark street, and the last of the evening light going out of the sky. "I wanted to be a singer," she said. Landon looked at her. "Before teaching, before your father, I used to sing everywhere." Her voice was soft. "I had a voice, Landon, a real voice. People would stop." She paused. "I chose teaching because it was steady and singing was a dream, and I was practical." Another pause. "I have never entirely forgiven myself for being practical." The room was quiet. "Do you regret it?" he asked. She thought about it honestly, the way she thought about everything. "Some days," she said. "And then I think about my students. 31 years of them." A small sound that was almost a laugh. "I think I touched more lives as a teacher than I would have as a singer. But I would have liked to know, to try." From the corner, Ruthie made a sound. "Ruthie," Landon said without looking over. "I'm fine," she said. She was not fine. She was weeping as silently as a woman of her vocal tendencies was capable of weeping, which was not very silently at all. "I know this story already, and it still gets me every time." Vivian looked at her oldest friend with an expression of complete and affectionate exasperation. Then she looked at Landon. "Sing something," he said. She looked at him. "Right now, whatever you want." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then, Vivian Hale, partially paralyzed, long past the worst thing her body had ever done to her, closed her eyes and began to hum. It was low and slow and not entirely steady. The stroke had taken some of the steadiness, but underneath the damage, the pitch was true, and the melody was there, whole and clear. And Landon recognized it after a moment. An old gospel song his grandmother used to sing, one he hadn't heard since he was small. He didn't say anything. He just held her hand and listened. In the corner, Ruthie gave up any pretense of composure entirely and wept openly into her tissue, which she would later describe to everyone she knew as the most beautiful thing that has happened in this neighborhood in years. Landon would hear that description secondhand and would not correct it because he thought she might be right. The call came on a Monday morning just before 8. Landon was in his car a few blocks from the office when his phone rang through the speakers. A man named Victor Lang, who ran a small real estate law firm and had been a quiet professional acquaintance of Landon's for years. They didn't socialize. They referred clients to each other occasionally. Victor was not the kind of man who called early without a reason. "I need to tell you something," Victor said, "and I need you to understand I'm telling you because I respect you, not because I'm looking for anything in return." "Go ahead." "Martin Greer's office called mine last week. They're building a case around the estate clause in your father's will, specifically the provision that gives you sole authority over your mother's care decisions. They're framing it as a guardianship concern, insufficient oversight, unilateral decision-making, possible financial mismanagement." A pause. "The filing would name you as the respondent, your brother as the petitioner." Landon pulled the car to the side of the street. "The filing isn't submitted yet," Victor continued, "but Greer's office is gathering documentation. They've been requesting medical records from 2 of your mother's former care providers. They may approach current household staff." Landon thought about Maya in the kitchen, Tristan's easy posture at the island. "Just for your honest observations, nothing that would compromise your position." "Thank you," Landon said. "I'm sorry, Landon." "Don't be. You did the right thing." He sat in the parked car for a while. He did not call a lawyer. He did not call Tristan. He went over, in sequence, everything Tristan had said and done since arriving. The questions about the estate, the comments about the cost of running the house, the early morning phone call on the front steps, the way he'd looked at the bookshelves during that first dinner while his phone screen showed something that wasn't photos. He thought about his mother's voice in the sitting room. Sorry is the beginning, not the end. He was not going to let Tristan make this about sorry. He went to the office. He had calls and a site meeting, and he took all of them steadily because the work did not stop, and he had never been a man who let the work stop. But in the afternoon, he cleared the rest of the day, drove to the house, and let himself in. Tristan was in the sitting room with Vivian, reading to her, an old novel from her shelf, something by James Baldwin, and to his credit, he was reading it well, with patience, pausing where she signaled with her hand that she wanted a line again. Whatever Tristan was or wasn't, this part was real. Landon stood in the hallway and watched for a moment and let it be real. Then he said, "Tristan, kitchen, now." Tristan looked up. Something moved across his face, fast, disciplined, and then the easy expression came back. He closed the book, told Vivian he'd be right back, and followed Landon to the kitchen. Landon closed the door. He didn't raise his voice. He had decided on the drive over that he would not raise his voice because this was not a conversation that needed volume. It needed clarity. "Martin Greer," Landon said. Tristan's face went very still. "You retained Martin Greer's office to contest the guardianship clause in Dad's will. They've been pulling medical records. They were going to approach Maya." He watched his brother. "You want to tell me I have it wrong?" Tristan was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. Not defensive, not apologetic, but careful in the way of a man reconsidering which version of the truth to offer. "I have concerns about how Mom's situation is being managed. That's legitimate. That's not an attack on you. You hired a lawyer without telling me. I tried talking to you. You shut it down. You asked me about the estate finances over dinner a few days after you arrived. That's not a conversation, Tristan. That's reconnaissance." Landon kept his voice even. "You came here because you thought I was distracted. You thought if you positioned yourself as the concerned son, the one who showed up, who was present, who read to her, you could build a case that I was running this house without proper oversight and use it to challenge the will." Tristan opened his mouth. "Don't." Landon held up one hand. "I've watched you do this our entire lives. You arrive when something looks valuable, and you make yourself necessary, and then you make a move. You did it with the Atlanta property. You did it with Dad's business contacts the year after he died. I let those go because they were things, and this is Mom. His voice stayed flat, even, controlled. "This is Mom, Tristan." The kitchen was quiet. Through the wall they could both hear, faintly, the sound of music from the sitting room. Maya must have arrived, had put on the record, the daily ritual unchanged. Vivian's world continuing on its gentle axis while her son stood in the kitchen with the distance of years between them and no good way across it. Tristan sat down at the island. He didn't look like a man who'd been caught. He looked like a man who was tired, which was different. And for a moment Landon saw his brother clearly. Not the charm, not the positioning, but the person underneath, smaller than he presented, genuinely uncertain. A man who had spent his life in his older brother's shadow and had never fully forgiven either of them for it. "I'm not trying to take anything from you," Tristan said. It came out quieter than his other sentences. I didn't want to be left out again. Every decision about Mom, every choice about the house, all of it, it's yours. It's always been yours. And I know that's partly because I've never been here. I know that. But it doesn't feel good to be the son who gets a phone call after the fact." Landon looked at him for a long time. "You want to be involved," Landon said. "Yes, then be involved. Come when you say you're going to come. Call her, not when you want something, just to call. Be a son." He pulled out the other stool and sat across from his brother. "But if Greer's office takes one more step toward filing anything, I will respond to it fully, and it will be the end of whatever goodwill we have left. Are we clear?" Tristan looked at the counter. "Clear. Call Greer today and tell him to stop." "I will." Landon stood. He looked at his brother for a moment. This man he'd known his entire life and understood so imperfectly, who loved their mother and also wanted what she represented, who was both those things simultaneously and probably always had been. "She's not an estate, Tristan. She's a person. When you're ready to be in the room with the person, the door is open." He left the kitchen. He went to the sitting room. Vivian was in her wheelchair by the window, the record playing, her hand moving on the armrest in its quiet rhythm. She looked at him when he entered, the teacher's look, the one that read the room before any sentence was spoken. "Is it handled?" she asked. He stopped, looked at her. "You knew?" She held her gaze steadily. "I know my sons." She let that sit for exactly the right amount of time. "Is it handled?" "Yes." She nodded. She looked back at the window. "Sit with me." He pulled his chair close and sat, and neither of them spoke for a while, and the record played, and outside the light went gray and thin, and the bare trees held their ground the way bare trees do, stripped down, still rooted, waiting with the specific patience of things that know spring is coming even when nothing looks like it yet. The letter was 4 paragraphs long. Maya had written it on a Sunday night at her aunt's kitchen table, by hand first and then typed, and she had read it 3 times before she folded it into an envelope and addressed it to Landon Hale. It was a resignation letter. She'd been thinking about it for a couple of weeks. Not because anything had gone wrong, not because Tristan's approach had unsettled her, not because of any single event she could point to and say, "That is the reason." The reason was something less definite and more honest than that. It was the growing awareness that she had crossed some invisible line in her own interior, that she was no longer working for the Hale family so much as she was living inside it, and that the distinction mattered in ways she was only beginning to understand. She thought about Vivian every morning when she woke up. She thought about whether she'd slept well, whether the weather would affect her joints, whether the therapy session had been too tiring or not tiring enough. She thought about Landon, about the change in him over the recent weeks, the way he'd gone from a man who stood in doorways to a man who pulled up a chair, and what that shift had cost him, and whether it would hold. She thought about Ruthie's next visit, and whether she'd bring sweet potato pie again, or switch to her other offering, which was a bread pudding that everyone agreed was technically excellent and somehow deeply depressing to look at. She thought about these people the way you think about people who are yours, and that was the problem. She was a caregiver. She was not family. And the line between those two things, which had always been clear in every other position she'd held, had blurred in this house in ways that she wasn't sure were healthy. For her, for Vivian, or for Landon, who had begun looking at her like she was something other than staff, which was either the most natural development in the world or a complication that would eventually cost all of them more than it was worth. She sealed the envelope on Sunday night. She put it in her bag. She planned to leave it on the kitchen counter Monday morning before Vivian was up. She did not leave it on the kitchen counter. She was standing in the kitchen early that morning, the envelope in her hand, when she heard Vivian's voice from the sitting room. One word, her name, called with the particular inflection that meant she was awake and wanted company, not assistance. Maya put the envelope in her coat pocket and went in. They had breakfast together, the way they always did on mornings when Brenda came late. Maya set Vivian's adapted plate and her own mug of tea, and they sat by the window, and the morning light came in pale and cold off the empty street, and Vivian told her, in the slow, careful way that was its own kind of precision, about a student she'd had years ago who had written the worst essay she had ever received in her teaching career, and had then gone on to publish several novels. "Worst essay," Vivian said. "Third chapter, best book. What did you tell him when the book came out?" Vivian's face moved. "I told him the essay was still bad." Maya laughed. Vivian laughed. The morning held them both for a moment, easy and warm, and Maya felt the envelope in her coat pocket and said nothing. She left it on the kitchen counter when she went home that evening. Landon found it the next morning. He read it at the kitchen table alone before anyone else was up. Vivian still asleep, Brenda not yet arrived, the house in its early quiet. He read it once straight through. Then he set it down and looked at the window for a while. He read it again. The letter was honest in the way Maya was honest about everything. Direct, without drama, and precise in locating the thing that was actually true. She wrote that she was grateful for the position and for the trust placed in her. She wrote that she believed Vivian's care was in a significantly better place than it had been when she started, and that the improvement would hold because it was structural now, not dependent on any single person. She wrote, and this was the sentence Landon read 3 times, that she had let herself become too close to this family to serve it well, and that the professional distance that made good care possible had eroded in ways she hadn't anticipated and couldn't fully correct while remaining in the position. She didn't mention him by name. She didn't need to. He put the letter in his jacket pocket. He made coffee. He stood at the window while it brewed and looked at the street. The first real snow of the season coming down in the thin, tentative way of early snow that isn't committed yet, still considering whether to stay. He went to his mother. Vivian was awake. Had been for a while, judging by the angle of the lamp, which she could not move herself and which Maya always left at exactly the right position for morning reading, and which had already been moved, meaning someone had been in before Landon arrived. He looked at his mother. His mother looked back at him with her teacher's eyes and said nothing. He sat down. He took the letter out of his pocket and held it in both hands without unfolding it. "You already know," he said. Vivian's expression confirmed this. "She left it in the kitchen. You had Brenda bring it to you." The left side of Vivian's face moved in the way that meant, obviously. Landon looked at the folded letter. "She thinks she's too close to this family." Vivian held his gaze. "She's right that the dynamic has changed." He turned the letter over in his hands. "She's wrong that it means she should leave." His mother waited. She was a remarkable waiter. Years of teenagers had given her a patience for silence that could outlast almost anyone. "I don't want her to go," Landon said. It came out simply, without the qualifications he usually wrapped around things that were true. "Not because of what it would mean for your care, because—" He stopped. Vivian made a small sound. "I know," he said, "I know." She leaned forward slightly, the effort visible, the intention clear, and reached out her left hand, and Landon took it, and she held it for a moment. And then she said, the way she always said the thing she'd considered carefully, "Then tell her. She might say no." "She might." Vivian's eyes were steady. "Say it anyway. Some things need to be said even when the answer is uncertain. You know this." A beat. "You have always known this. You have just been practical." Landon looked at his mother. "I am your mother," she said. "I did not raise a man who is afraid of the true thing." She released his hand. She settled back. "Go." He stood. From the hallway, from the chair that Ruthie occupied by some law of nature that Landon had stopped questioning, came the unmistakable sound of a woman who had been present for this entire conversation, attempting to communicate that she had not been present for this entire conversation. "Ruthie," Landon said. "Silence. I heard all of that, didn't I?" "Every word," Ruthie confirmed. "I came early. The door was unlocked. I made myself comfortable." A pause. For what it's worth, I agree with your mother. Go, now, before she talks herself into something sensible. Landon put his coat on. And Landon, Ruthie called after him as he moved toward the front door. He stopped. She didn't mail it, Ruthie said. She left it on the counter. People who are certain don't leave things on counters. They mail them. He stood in the entrance for a moment. Then he opened the front door and went out into the snow, which had made up its mind while he wasn't looking and was coming down properly now, steady and serious, and covering everything in that temporary particular white that makes a city look briefly like it has just been forgiven for something. He found her at her aunt's house on the south side. He had her address from the employment file. He drove through the snow, the serious, committed kind, a city that had accepted winter and was no longer negotiating, and sat in the car for a moment before getting out. He was not a man who rehearsed conversations. He had always believed that if you knew what you meant, the words would follow. Sitting in the car, he discovered that knowing what he meant and being able to say it were two different skills. He rang the bell. A woman in her 60s answered. Maya's aunt, he assumed, with the same direct, assembled quality that Maya had, as if the family simply produced people who stood in doorways like they owned the ground under them. She looked at him. He told her his name. She looked at him for a moment longer. Then she called into the house. Maya, the man from Lincoln Park is here. He was shown to a small sitting room and left there. The house was warm and smelled like something cooking. Not soup this time, something with spice and depth. A Saturday morning smell on a weekday. There were family photographs on the wall, a shelf of books, a child's drawing taped near the window that he looked at for a moment before he understood it was probably years old and put his eyes somewhere else. Maya came in. She was not in her uniform, a dark sweater, jeans, her hair loose instead of pulled back, and she looked like herself in a way he hadn't fully seen before, which made sense because he'd only ever seen her at work, in the mode of work, and this was the person underneath that. She looked at him with the same steady, unhurried assessment she always used. You didn't have to come here, she said. I know. He had the folded letter in his coat pocket. He didn't take it out. I want to ask you to stay. She was quiet. Not because your leaving would disrupt the care plan, not because of anything practical. He kept his eyes on hers. Because my mother asks about you in the mornings, and because you're the person who noticed her hand moving and understood what it meant, and because this house is different when you're in it, not just for her, for all of us. A pause. For me. Maya looked at the window. The snow was still coming down outside, soft and indifferent, covering the south side street in the same white it covered everything else. I wrote in that letter that I'd gotten too close, she said. I know. I meant it. I know that too. He didn't move toward her or away. He held the ground he was on. I'm not asking you to fix the distance. I'm asking you to let it be what it is and stay anyway. Because the alternative, you leaving the house, going back to what it was before you came, I don't think that's right for my mother, and I don't think it's right for you either. She looked at him. You don't know what's right for me. No, he said. You're right. I don't. He put his hands in his coat pockets. I know that you're good at staying in rooms when it's hard. I know my mother laughed for the first time in what felt like forever because you put on a record and paid attention. And I know that you left a letter on a counter instead of mailing it, which my mother's best friend pointed out as evidence that you are not entirely certain either. Something shifted in Maya's face. It wasn't quite a smile. It was the thing that comes before a smile, when the decision is still being made. Ruthie, she said. Ruthie, he confirmed. She was quiet. He waited, the way she had taught him to, without filling the space or forcing the answer. I need it to be clear, Maya said. What I am and what I'm not in that house. Professional first. Everything else finds its own time. I can't do good work if I don't know where I stand. That's fair. And I need the music in the care log. Formally. Dr. Lawson's endorsement, Brenda's sign-off, everything documented. I don't want to be working around anyone anymore. Done. And Ruthie needs to stop reading my mail. I will convey that, Landon said. It won't work, but I'll convey it. That was when she smiled. It arrived fully, the way things arrive when they've been held back long enough. Not slow, not cautious, but complete. He hadn't seen her smile that way before. It changed the room. I'll come back, she said. He nodded. He moved toward the door, then stopped. My mother wanted to be a singer, he said. She was too practical to try. He looked at Maya. I keep thinking about that. Thursday, she said. He drove back through the snow. In the months that followed, the house was different, louder, more alive. Landon came every few days, and some mornings when the house was the place he wanted to be. Tristan called Vivian every week, directly, which was the right order. Brenda retired in the winter. On her last day, Vivian said, "You kept me alive. Maya taught me to live again." Brenda nodded and left before anyone could see her face. Landon and Maya had not resolved the distance she had named. They had not needed to. Some things find their shape without being forced. There was a day when she laughed the real laugh, unguarded, complete, and Landon thought, there it is. He did not say it out loud. He was learning the difference between knowing a thing and the right time for it. On a Saturday, he came to the house and heard music before he reached the door. Not the quiet daily volume. Something fuller, alive. Motown. The kind of song that does not allow you to stand still. He moved to the sitting room doorway. Maya was dancing, fully inside the music, arms loose, moving the way she moved when she was certain no one was watching. Vivian was in the center of the room, not watching from the side, but in it. Her left arm moving, her face completely open, laughing with both sides in the way she had been slowly reclaiming. They had not heard him come in. He stood in the doorway and thought about that first evening. The phone screen in the empty office, his mother's hand on the armrest. All the time he had stood in doorways looking into her life and told himself that providing for it was the same as being in it. He stepped into the room. Maya turned. Vivian turned, her face flushed and bright and more alive than Landon had seen it since before the stroke, and she said his name the way she used to say it when he was a boy walking into a room she was already in. The way that meant, you are here, good, that is exactly right. He crouched in front of her wheelchair, eye level. Will you teach me to dance? Vivian looked at him, then at Maya, then back at her son. She let the moment breathe. Then, with the affectionate precision of a woman who had been watching Landon move through the world for years, you have no rhythm. I know, he said. Teach me anyway. From the hallway came the sound of a phone camera activating. Then, Ruthie's voice, businesslike. I'm on Facebook Live. The lighting is good. Everyone continue. Vivian covered her mouth with her left hand, shoulders shaking. Maya had turned toward the window, but the set of her shoulders made it entirely clear she was laughing. The uncontrolled kind. The kind that arrives when something is so precisely right. The only response is surrender. Landon stood. He held out his hand to Maya. She turned from the window. She looked at his hand. She looked at him. She took it. They were not graceful. Vivian directed with her left hand every time Landon went wrong, which was often. Ruthie provided live commentary that nobody had requested and everyone could hear. The record played. The light came long and gold through the windows. And Vivian Hale, still here, still wanting, still the realest person in any room she had ever occupied, tapped her hand on the armrest in time with the music and watched her son learn what he should have learned long ago. Not how to dance, how to stay.